I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. Welcome to another episode of SAE Tomorrow Today, a show about emerging technology and trends, mobility with leaders and innovators to make it all happen. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to be joined by Prashant Gulate, CEO, SDVerse. On today's episode, we'll explore the first ever automotive software marketplace, and we'll talk about how this innovative platform matches vendors and buyers to fast-track the evolution and development of software-defined vehicles. We hope you enjoy this episode. Prashant, welcome to the podcast.
Grayson, thank you for having me. I have listened to so many of your conversations and just super excited to be here. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You're here at a really interesting time, a very good time. The automotive industry is changing. It's becoming an industry that used to be defined by metal bending, welding, bolts, nuts, screws, interiors at one point, and now it's being defined by software. The interior, the welding, software, no priority. How is software changing the automotive industry?
You know, there are so many ways I think I could sort of go about this, but just to, I think it's fair to say, like you also mentioned, it's changing the car, it's changing the business, it's changing user expectations, right? So if I just talk about changing the car, like the first car I remember that had software in it was in the 1977 with 7 lines of code, right? The Chevy Colorado. Today, that 7 lines of code has blown up to 150 million lines of code. And that 150 million is going to a billion, right? So it's safe to say the complexity is increasing and the cost is increasing, right? We've done some work and estimate that the industry spent about $100 billion in software in the last 3 years. And that cost is going to double every 7 or 8 years. And consumers are not going to pay double of anything, right? So complexity is increasing, the cost is going to increase, and the willingness to pay is not there. But everything today, maybe other than your shoes, is software-defined. Cars will be no different. And so business is going to change. You know, very confident about that.
Going back in automotive history, because you opened the door, so I'm going to follow you down that path. In the 90s, you had the detachable radio. Everybody had to have the detachable radio, and then you hit it in your glove box or under your seat. And then Alpine came out with the pop-up screen. Oh, I got to have the screen. Then we had the TVs and the headrest, and eventually the OEMs did that. And then OEMs started off the factory line putting digital screens in all the vehicles, started the higher-end vehicles and worked their way through. Now a screen is common pretty much in every vehicle because the consumer expects it. You get in a vehicle today, where's the screen? What do you mean there's no screen? Are we getting that same way with that software experience where we kind of, you look at the head unit experience has changed now, where they're just accustomed to it, where they're going to get accustomed to the software just being there, part of the integral aspect of the vehicle?
Yeah, I think the smartphones kind of changed the user expectations. So people spend so much time on phones and kind of have digital lives that they live through phones and, you know, their iPads and laptops. And that expectation is now going to extend to cars, right? That, you know, you don't necessarily need a screen because you don't want distraction, but, you know, the experience is like, you know, should be like a smartphone, should be able to play my music, should be able to play, you know, do all of the things that I do on my phone. So, and that's what we see in talking to a lot of consumers, companies also. Infotainment and safety through ADAS is kind of the top 2 use cases and differentiators, if you will, right? Everything else people kind of consider hygiene. So I think the screen, I mean, it's a little bit, it's very regional. So if you look at vehicles in China, very focused on consumer experience. So, you know, screen, the display size is a differentiator, and, you know, the wheelbase is becoming less so. So the experience, all of that is important. But it's very regional. Europe, we've not seen that so much. US, I don't think people go into a showroom asking for, hey, give me a car with a big screen. So it's very regional is what I would say.
You're right about regional, because if you look at the Chinese automotive market, I personally find it's fascinating. You said the Xiaomi car, it's interchangeable parts. I call it the Lego car because you can add on the screen, you can add this. It's very, very, so I'll use the term, it's an accessory as a cell phone, essentially, the way that they built the car and the way that the Chinese auto market is developing. To me, it's a very user experience, accessory-based market. Here in America, there's kind of a divide on what the consumers want, where in China, most of the vehicles just work with your phone, very similar to Tesla. You get in. Do you see that becoming, so you have the ADAS, you have the infotainment as big drivers today. Do you eventually see it, the getting rid of the key becoming that potential third pillar? Because now we have states that are putting your license on your phone. So you have Apple Wallet, you have Google Pay. You don't really need to carry a wallet. So will the trend of the phone becoming a key, do you see that extending as the software ramps up in automotive?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, you're absolutely right. But I think it's a little bit more than features like the phone as a key. I think it's the frictionless user experience, right? People have come to expect that, and companies are and should drive towards it. So you should not have to press 4 buttons to connect your phone with your Bluetooth. You should just walk in and it should connect. You should walk to your car and it should open right after it's verified. So that frictionless experience, that even that personalized user experience is becoming a priority for consumers, and that, you're right, is not regional. Like nobody sits in their car and wants to press or find 20 different buttons to but there's still some value to the look and feel, the physical experience of it, which is why regulators are mandating it in some cars, right? So it's going to be some time before people get more used to completely like knobless experience and stuff, but I think that's the direction that the industry is going to go. Phone is going to be part of your whole mobile experience.
If you look at the various different, you have your traditional OEMs, your newer OEMs, there's a common denominator. There's no consistent experience. And the same thing goes for the ADAS, the infotainment, the user experience. How do you properly set the user expectations, since there's a common denominator? All these vehicles run on software, but all the layers on top of that are different, and the consumers have different expectations. How do you properly set those expectations from vehicle to vehicle, or from brand to brand?
I think the companies are going to differentiate themselves based on user experience, right? The unfortunate part of that is that it is people relate to these brands differently, and I think that's what companies are carrying over. So there will be differentiation, but I think a lot of the differentiation, as companies are realizing, is going to come from software, right? And some of it is, let's say, driven by what users or consumers need. Some of it is, cost savings also. I kind of give this example all the time. If you think about it, right, you've got 20 OEMs. Each OEM has multiple brands. Each brand has multiple vehicle models. Each vehicle model has multiple trims. So at any point in time, at any price point, a consumer has more than 100 choices. So it's a paradox of choice. What that does is, there's enough research available, Grayson, that if you have 37 boxes of cereal, you will not buy cereal, right? And here you have 100 boxes, 100 cars to choose from. So that creates its own complications. So where I'm going with all of this is that through the use of software, right, you can differentiate your vehicle models and trims and so on and so forth. You don't have to, build different cars. So more standardization can happen with software, is I think what we are going to see over time. And I just sort of wanted to draw this parallel. We started to talk about software. I think almost 10 years ago, back in 2012, Mark Andreessen, the famous venture capitalist, right, he said, he famously wrote a manifesto saying software is eating the world, right? And then Jensen Huang in 2019 says AI is eating the software that's eating the world. So software is eating the world, then AI is eating the software, right? And then the CEO of Ford, Jim Farley, said, we are learning to write software for the first time in our 100-year history. So that kind of tells you how much work we have to do in the industry to do more software, to integrate more software into the business. I'm very confident. I think it's in the next 4 or 5 years. It's a lot more differentiation, a lot more use cases will come from the use of software and then AI. But just, I think we're just sort of in very early stages of it.
Which raises the big questions. We talked earlier with metal and building an internal combustion engine, building battery plants. How does the traditional automotive industry develop a software first mentality? Right. So you had Jensen made his statement, Mr. Andreessen made his statement, but yet it doesn't seem for a lot of automotive that those statements really carried over. It seems that in the worlds that Jensen plays in and Mark plays in, yes, those worlds did, but when you get into the traditional core, it didn't really seem to resonate. Why do you think that is?
So I'll say 2 things, right? I think you touched on the topic of China, which is interesting, right? If you look at all of these new upstarts coming in China, right, from NIO, Xiaopeng, Li Auto, you name it, right? Think about the difference in the founders there versus here, right? All of them have a technology background. They did not come from, so, all of these 100 years that we've been in this business, we always thought industrialization and manufacturing is complex, and which it is. But companies in China have now kind of a lot of other upstarts, like right from our Tesla, Rivian, and others have proven, that people can come from a technology background and build cars, right? Apple evaluated building cars, didn't do that ultimately. But point is that, the world is changing. I think it's going to follow a process of natural evolution, right? There'll be a lot of people have called this the Darwinian decade coming up. So there will be some companies that will thrive and exist and survive, and some that will not. And part of that reason is going to be, it's just, it's going to be difficult to change. Some of it comes from legacy. Some of it just comes from willingness to change. Everybody wants to see change. They don't want to change, right? So I think it's this willingness to change, adaptability, etc., that's going to drive a lot of it. To be fair, most big companies are doing a lot of work, doing a lot of experiments. You mentioned, one of the European OEMs. They've gone out and spent, does like more than $20 billion in trying to do software. Hasn't worked so far, but I think these are all the right things that companies are doing, with focus on capital efficiency, focus on collaboration, and again, like I said, it's going to whoever changes faster and gets to the consumers faster is going to win.
The big thing to unlock is the 7-year historical cycle. Software can't wait 7 years. It's going to turn into Rip Van Winkle. It's not going to work. How do you see that? You talk about change, and you're right with traditional automotive change, but how do they get off that mentality where you and I have an iPhone, say every month or 2 months it's updating, or our computers are updating? How do we get to that mentality for traditional auto, that the software constantly has to update, because that's what the user expects. They expect updates. They expect new features. I remember the old days. This goes back when Michael Dell, the first round before he retired at Dell, the running joke was, you buy Dell today, I'll ship it to you in 3 days. No, by the way, it's obsolete when you get it in 3 days. But now with software, that could change it. It only gets better.
Right. And so, again, 2 points here, right? One is there will always be segments, and very valuable segments of the industry, that will not bother about software like we are talking about, like smartphone. Like Ferrari is never going to care or go this direction. Rolls-Royce, you don't buy a Rolls-Royce or a Ferrari, so it can connect and work well with your smartphone, if you will, right? So there is going to be that segment that, will sort of be almost immune to this transformation, right? I mean, they are going to need software for sure, for braking, for controls, for, safety and so on and so forth, but not necessarily for the user experience. Sort of the other segments, like call it the, A, B, C, D, as we call them in Europe, is going to, want to embed your digital lifestyle more and more into this, right? And that's where a lot of the work that's happening in this. So, the SDV space, the software-defined vehicle space, like SDVs is both a very used and abused word, but the magic there is that your, software is done separate from hardware, right? And so once you have hardware that, is kind of, you have the compute capacity, you have the operating system, and so on and so forth, like the software can unlock a lot of value. So that's where you get faster updates. Like why does on a phone work, Grayson, is you have the hardware, which is the phone, you've got an operating system, you've got displays, you've got, compute capacity. All of that is being done for cars today. And we expect by 2030 or so, practically all OEMs, major OEMs, will be on either zonal or central compute. So the architecture will change, and then the ability to do software is going to change significantly. And we'll see more use cases come out of software and mobility space. So this OTA thing, I think, like what you were saying, updating your car is already happening in quite a few cars. So that's not going to be a big differentiator, but the ability to do it faster, better, more features, unlock AI capabilities, etc., I think that's going to get unlocked in the next few years.
AI in the car, to me, is going to be a massive opportunity. You have the true functioning of the car from what it can unlock from a cost efficiency and from a safety standpoint. But the user experience in the car, what AI can unlock, it's, I don't know, say I'm visiting you and we're driving and say, hey, car, where can I go buy a Starbucks? Oh, do I go 1.2 miles here? And would you like me to charge your card for $4.99? Oh, you like one too? Okay, $8.99. We get 2 cups of coffee, go to the drive-thru, it's already paid for. That's awesome. It eliminates that friction. And you said the word, and you're right. We're in the middle of a massive transformation in automotive, and software is eating the car. And it's happening. Where does the SDVerse marketplace fit in the middle of this? It's a massive transformation. So where does it fit?
So, see, in the last few years, what was happening was there was this big trend towards these 4 pillars of transformation: connectivity, autonomy, sharing, electric, right? We've seen over time that nobody made money on sharing. Willingness to pay on connectivity is there. Autonomy is still kind of lagging. You probably saw the Cruise announcement yesterday and some of the other, right? So, and electrification has been, I'm very bullish about this and, care deeply about it. But again, mixed results from an industry point of view. So, capital efficiency, like you only have a finite amount of dollars, which have become very expensive over the last few years. And so companies have to decide where are they going to, use like their capital. So one of the things that I like very much is Warren Buffett used to say, the only job of any manager, any CEO is the most efficient allocation of resources, right? So that's one of the things that we, think about at SDVerse. So putting this in the context of automotive software, right? Like I mentioned, software is increasing, complexity is increasing, spending is increasing. Everybody was trying to do software by themselves. Those experiments did not work out that well for everyone. So what companies are realizing now is they need to do software in partnership with others, right? But how are they going to do it? Because the entire supply chain that either you can do everything by yourself or you can go buy. The process of buying software does not exist today, right? Because the industry spends hundreds of billions of dollars buying hardware that comes with software. You cannot buy software today, right? So that's what we are changing, right? We are helping companies find software much faster. And just to give you an example, right, companies spend we've done some work and estimate that about 16 weeks to, do your make versus buy decision, to find software, then to do RFI, RFQ. We've done the work with some of our OEM partners to bring that 16-week cycle down to a few hours, right? So we're bringing down months down to minutes and hours, and that efficiency then gets, so you get your faster updates of software, you get faster cycles for verification, validation, and so on and so forth. So it just, we get to do things a lot more faster, promote reuse, reduce cost, and that just unlocks a lot of value for consumers in the end.
Staying on the Buffett theme, Buffett's very famous for saying he likes to invest in businesses that have a big moat. Me being a child at heart, I want sharks and alligators in that moat. How do you build that moat around your platform?
Yeah. So we are a marketplace, right? So we bring buyers and sellers of software together, right? Our differentiation comes from so first and foremost, we are the only company doing this so far, right? Our moat is if I just maybe escalate this to a sort of a higher level, if you think about it, right? Marketplaces have existed for thousands of years now, right? In the last 20 years or so, you've seen marketplaces like right from an eBay, Amazon, etc. These were horizontal marketplaces doing everything, right? What you are going to see, and has happened also in the last few years, is vertical marketplaces, right? So take StockX, a shoe focus. You could sell shoes on eBay as an example, but no, you go to StockX. Same thing. For us, what we are doing is we are creating a vertical marketplace, which means that we are very specialized and focused on automotive software. What that means is that we work with our buyers and sellers, so OEMs and tier ones and startups. We bring all of their software into a very standardized format. We have 180 attributes that we use to define your software. Nobody does that. Those 180 attributes are our IP. We know how to use it, right, and get information about software. And then we package that information and put this in front of buyers. So what that does is a buyer today at an OEM has to either go to a conference or do Google searches, prepare packets of information, put that in RFI, send out an RFI, get RFQ, get hundreds of Excel files, consolidate it all together. What we do is through our own IP and some of the work we do in AI, we bring all of that information, right, ready within minutes. So that's kind of how we build differentiation through our attributes list, through our relationships with the buyers and suppliers. And then, we work with companies that we have on our platform, and these are some of the biggest names and some startups in the industry, and get feedback and improve the platform. So it's this ongoing contributions that they have made, like a lot of the work that they have done for us, with us on the platform, I think is how we differentiate and stand out.
What type of automation have you built into the platform? Because you could be dealing with some pretty interesting large data sets because this software gets super complex.
Right. So just to clarify, we don't automotive software. So if you're looking for, let's say, if an OEM is looking for park assist software, if they're looking for virtual ECU, they're not going to come to our platform and download anything, right? Because there are IP issues with this. We leave the IP between the buyer and OEM and suppliers, right? What we do is matchmaking, right? So the automation that we do is on the matchmaking side, right? So the first level of automation is when sellers are providing their information, they provide it in a more standard format. They don't have to do a lot of work. Second, what we do is we have our algorithms that do the matchmaking, right, between what a buyer is looking for and what a seller, and which is the part that I was saying is vertical marketplaces do this really well. And then thirdly, we are rolling out in production some AI features, things like you don't have to go through a 500-page document. You can ask questions of it, right? So using some RAG methods, which is retrieval augmented generation and stuff. So we can extract information. The AI does not hallucinate. It's very specific to what you're asking for and what's available, not something that's available on the internet, but what is very relevant to the supplier's offering. So we have automation. Like I said, I mean, the beauty of what we part of the beauty of what we're doing, Grayson, is that we have in the industry today a very unstructured analog process of software discovery, right? We are making it digital and structured and automated, right? So I think you asked a question. I didn't exactly think we didn't. I don't position it as such, but I think you asked a great question, and I see there's so much value in in taking this unstructured to structured and making it digital.
There's a lot of opportunity in matchmaking. There's a lot of revenue in matchmaking, but there's also a lot of cost savings in matchmaking. Where if you say supplier A is trying to sell software to OEM, and if you have that data set, you can, into a recommendation engine or various other things, you can start to recommend that software. What type of cost savings are your platform customers seeing today? And as you scale, what type of cost savings do you see they could see in the future?
So I'll just add 2 data points about how the industry functions and then where we are making a difference, right? So if you just think just at an aggregate level, when it comes to software, the about 60% of the time is spent on development, about close to 18% on validation and verification, and then the remainder on integration and testing and so forth, right? What we are doing is we are very focused on the first part, which is function development, right? And that's where we are helping companies save about 80% time, 80%, right? And so what that means is like this 6-month cycle for identifying a software, right? We are taking that down to a few hours. What that means is you can do faster feature rollouts. You can, like the over-the-air updates example that you just gave, now you can actually do it much sooner, much faster with higher quality. The other thing what we do is we promote a lot of reuse and standardization on the platform. I think one of the points that you had made earlier in the conversation was everybody has their own stack, right? And what we do is, anybody who has their whatever they're doing, they can come search on the platform what is compatible with their stack. And as more and more people gravitate towards one type of standard and solution, right, that kind of becomes an industry standard. We are not writing standards, we are not advocating for or pushing for standards, but we're promoting reuse of software, we are promoting efficient allocation of resources, and that kind of sets its own standards. So that's where we are focused right now. So about 80% today. We've done some research and published a white paper, Grayson, that about 10% of the software today is sourced separate from hardware, right? We're trying to take that, increase that number significantly. So over the next few years, we're trying to get it to 50 to 60%, if not more. And the more software you can source separately from hardware, the more cost reductions you can have. So another 20% or so on top of it is a reasonable estimate.
Are there any limitations or exclusions to the type of software that you're willing to put on your platform?
It's a marketplace, so consumers kind of decide, like buyers and sellers, kind of decide, the market decides essentially, right? Where we have restrictions is the software has to meet regulation. What that means is import-export control. So it cannot be built or sold to a location where you got, the governments have export, which is, you've seen the world is a very polarized place today, a lot of regulation and restrictions, especially, on software these days. So that is what we comply with. Other than that, the way we categorize our software is we have 4 types of softwares on the platform. Onboard software, anything that goes on the car. Off-board software, like cloud services, and then tools and tool chains, right, model development, etc. And then finally, engineering services for integration. So that's the kind of 4 things we categorize all of our software in. onboard, offboard tools and services. So that's the kind of software. And then we have restrictions on, like I said, regulatory.
I know you're not a GitHub platform, but the curiosity hat's on. You said offboard. First thing that went to my head was cloud. Are there any cloud integrations with Azure, Google Cloud Compute, or AWS where if, say, OEM A purchases software from supplier B and you need to run it in a cloud architecture that it can just seamlessly port over there? Or has any of that integrations been done?
We create visibility and awareness around that, right? We don't force any OEM or supplier to use one cloud provider or the other. So we are cloud agnostic. We are standard agnostic, right? But if there are sellers on the platform who are, let's say, everybody's doing either Google Cloud or Azure or AWS, right? And all the buyers are doing that. So that kind of, the industry goes in that direction. That becomes a little bit more standard. But no, we don't promote one over the other.
You're Switzerland, then. Are you taking a Switzerland approach to this?
You could say that, exactly.
Okay, well, Switzerland does have some exclusives. They're the world's best watchmakers, and they make incredible chocolates. Are there any exclusivities on your platform where an individual or a corporation has developed software that's exclusively brokered through your platform?
We're not mandating anything other than, like I said, we're very focused on regulation, but we are not mandating. We are encouraging companies to provide software first on our platform. But again, we just launched, right? And so there is more time before we get to scale. But what we have seen, and it's been very encouraging, the adoption that we've had. We have 14 customers on the platform. We will be announcing a few more at CES or around CES that have signed up, right, already. And they have some very interesting use cases. So at this time, I think we are exceeding all of our metrics and targets. There is no need to push anyone in any direction. I think this is the way this was set up is it's industry. It's a collaboration for the industry by the industry, right? And the industry will decide, and individual players will decide how they want to use the platform. If they want to launch here first and sell something exclusively first, they're more than welcome. But we will not highlight that. We will not promote them anymore or any extra over anybody else because of this factor. They're completely, truly independent.
You say that you continue on the Switzerland model. So traditional platforms is an eBay or a StockX. They collect a listing fee and a transaction fee. That's the historical, the common model. Is that the business model of SDVerse, or do you have a different model that you're implementing?
So we have a flat fee model, right? So there is a subscription, an annual subscription, but it's flat fee. So you could be buying or selling tens of millions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars of software on the platform, but we don't take a percentage of that. We don't take a transaction fee. It's all encompassing. What that means is when you sign up on the platform, all of your entities, all of the companies where you have a stake in, all of your subsidiaries, everything is covered. So we're not focused on transactions. We're focused on bringing companies together and then helping, with the matchmaking aspect of it.
You're filling a void in the market. This has been obvious for quite a while to the individuals in your background from Faraday and from AI. You clearly understand the market. Why was this platform not created before in the past? Why now?
I think part of this is, Grayson, I believe the industry is at a tipping point, right? Meaning there's just software is, like I said, increasing in complexity, right? And cost. And different companies took different approaches to it, right? Some companies thought, hey, it's just software. I mean, we've kind of tackled all of the hardest problems in the world, engineering issues. We can do software. And as we've seen, that has turned out to be not true, right? So the whole aspect of insourcing did not turn out to be true. The second thing that industry started to see was the traditional development methods, like you design the hardware first, then you do software. That doesn't work either, right? So the industry was starting to call it shift left, right? Getting more software done earlier in the cycle. And so as the industry is moving towards software, right? And you can't do all of your own software, then you have to find software that works, correct? And how are you going to find that software? You go to conferences, you go to Google search, you talk to suppliers. And the challenge is when you talk to suppliers, not everyone, a lot of them will give you an ECU that comes with software. So point being that it was just this, it's like this perfect storm that things are changing, more complex, consumers are demanding these over-the-air update cycles, and you cannot achieve all of these objectives with the traditional method. So something new had to be done. And GM, Magna, Wipro kind of went through this cycle of, okay, how do we do this? How do we gain a lead in software, right? They went through a process of maybe, set up their own supplier portal, right? That every company in the world is going to come and say, hey, we're going to provide you information about what we do. They also evaluated, should we do advocate for more standards and standard bodies, right? But there are enough initiatives around that, and some of them overlapping, some not. And so after a lot of iteration for more than almost 2 years, right, they landed on this concept of it is a problem of the industry that only the industry can solve, right? And so came up with the concept of a marketplace, and hence, this is where we are. So tipping point, for automotive software. And again, not one company can solve it. So the spirit of collaboration was needed, capital efficiency was needed, and hence SDVerse. And since I've joined, I've been doing a lot of work and reading, studying about this. And maybe if we have more time, we can get into it. There was a Nobel Prize given out for market design in 2012, right, to Alvin Roth. And it's amazing. It's beautiful how, when the right kind of marketplace built with the right kind of design can create so much value over time. So that's what we are very focused on right now, right? A lot of getting the marketplace right, getting automotive software right, is where I'm focused and the team is focused right now.
When the market's built right, the market's seated, and it's functioning properly, you have success there. As we see, if you look at different variations of software, you have, let's just simplify, you have software 1.0, and now you have software 2.0 with large language models. And then you have various AI tools, if you want to use the term, that were forked around that. Do you see the platform SDVerse facilitating transactions of large language models, pre-learned data sets as well, perhaps, and then AI tools to make these functionalities work, perhaps a sim platform maybe in the future?
So, this is almost like this is sounding like you've seen a copy of our roadmap, which I know you haven't. Right? But we have a 4-year roadmap, a lot of work to be done there. I think we are just starting with solving one problem at this time, which is the problem of discovery and matchmaking, right? If we solve that itself saves, like I said, about 80% time. And then, you can enhance that and supplement that with a lot more things, right? More pre-trained data sets. So again, nobody has to do everything by themselves. More, a lot more work on AI. I think some of the examples that you were talking about AI application inside the car. One of the ones that I've been very excited about in the last almost year and a half now is AI agents, right? Now they're becoming a little bit more reality, but not so much in automotive still, right? But things like the examples that you gave earlier, that you're driving and you can give instructions and somebody is going to do those things for you. Like it's like an intelligent co-pilot sitting next to you doing those things. Hey, I'm late for like my airport, for my flight. Can you find me parking and pay for my reservation, right? Or I forgot my mother-in-law's birthday. Can you buy me a cake by the time I reach there, right? That kind of stuff. So all of these things, these applications can be done by agents. Again, we have quite a bit of thinking on our roadmap. It's probably too early to talk about that today. We're very focused. I have seen more companies fail not because of lack of ideas, but because of too many distractions. So we are very focused, along with our partners and the team, on one thing and one thing only right now, is to get the matchmaking done. Now we are focused, and that part is working. Now we are focused on scale and adoption, and then we'll get to everything else.
You're right about focus, but when you focus, the backside, you have to stay ahead of the curve. You have to do the roadmap and the planning, and you have to see what's coming, and you have to prepare the business for radical changes, as we saw what happened yesterday with one of your investors, with Cruise. That was a big change. As CEO of SDVerse, how do you stay ahead of the curve? And most importantly, how do you stay ahead of the trends that are going to have a dramatic impact across the entire global OEM and automotive ecosystem?
So, we don't have to do everything, right? Like I said, I keep going back to this. The way of running business, or at least my way of running business, is very focused on efficiency, right? Innovation is important and we need to do it, but we don't need to, throw money at or people at problems, so to speak. You hire motivated, talented, committed people who want to do something very meaningful. And so building the right team, having the right mindset, having the right kind of culture is where, we start. So, we've got people from some of the best companies in the world, but it's a very small team, right? We have while we are very focused on delivering what is needed, we keep thinking about what's next, what do we do next, what do we need to prepare. And so because it's a small team is why we are able to react much faster, right? And it's not, we don't have legacy structures, we don't have, anytime I hire, it's a very different conversation, right? You're going to be hands on, you're going to know what you're doing, we're not going to have you hire people who will do the work, right? So it's a hands-on setup. Everybody is very excited about the future, right? We stay on top of trends. We are opportunistic and react, but we have a base plan that we are, like I said, exceeding all of our targets right now.
In your opinion, Prashant, what does the future of the software-defined vehicle look like?
Like I was saying, I mean, we think about this at at least three levels. It's changing the car, it's changing the business, it's changing consumer expectations. So consumers don't go and buy cars because they are software defined vehicles, right? They just want cool cars with good experience and stuff, right? When we think software defined vehicles, I think one of the most important things for us is software is sold separate from hardware, right? And I kind of again, since it sounds like you're a history buff, I'll go back to history. The a lot of the innovation that we see today started to get unlocked about 100 years ago in the 50s, when you started to have these transistors came together, or tubes became, like, the early computers were built of few tubes became transistors became ICs came together to form, call it modern computers. But all of that needed separate hardware. So you had, IBM and everybody was writing separate software for different hardware. That's why it never scaled, right? Microsoft was the first company. Bill Gates kind of took this view that, and so did, like, very, hundreds of years ago, was Ada Lovelace. And these are the two people who kind of changed the course of history, if you will. Software is going to be different from hardware. They did that for the personal computers, right? So that unlocked. So once you don't have to worry about the hardware you're building for, you can do a lot more things. The applications you see today, you and I are sitting on Teams. There are people, Teams, Zoom, your phone applications. Nobody saw that, right? So I can't tell where this is going to go necessarily. There's that the infrastructure has to be gotten right, and which is where software-defined vehicles are tremendously valuable, right? Software can be done separate from hardware. You don't have to worry about doing one update and breaking one of the 150 ECUs in the car, right? And it's going to take time to make that transition towards this computing architecture, this new architecture that I'm talking about. Some companies are ahead, some, especially companies in China, some of the newer US companies are ahead. Tesla was able to take the leap because they started with that type of architecture, right? Established companies will get there. So, I mean, there's a lot of promise in SDVs, a lot of chaos, confusion also, but I think crisis is an opportunity, and that's what's happening in the industry today. We'll create more value, more profit pools. So far, I think the vision is right. I just think we can, there can be more that we can do in terms of imagination. So, to give you an example, right? A lot of claims around, or estimates around, automotive software profit pools are just based on, oh, we'll charge for navigation or heated seats or connectivity. That's not going to give you those, it's not going to recoup your investment. So we need to imagine and innovate better. And I think part of that will come from more collaboration between technology and automotive. I think we'll get there. Just it's going to take time, bold leadership also.
Let's not forget, looking back in history, all the telecommunication breakthroughs at Bell Labs.
Exactly.
They underpin communication today, what was invented in that lab in northern New Jersey.
Correct. And I mean, just on that topic, right? I mean, just 2 days ago, Google unveiled their new quantum computing chip, right? Willow. While it is quite some time before it'll something like that will get into, like, real production and so start solving real commercial applications. But the impact of something like that is just so massive within transportation also, right? Within climate change, within automotive, within how you design cars, how batteries get recycled to batteries get designed. There's just so much that can and will be done. We just have to, again, make the right decisions, do it in a capital efficient way. The questions that you asked, right? How do you innovate and stay ahead in this transformation? All of that is very important. And the industry has been around more than 120 years. It will be there. People's transportation needs will evolve. There'll be a lot more, especially on commercial trucks. You'll see more autonomy, I believe, come faster. So very exciting times we live in. Very bullish about that, and the work that we are doing at SDVerse to support all of that transformation is to, I keep going back to the point about efficiency, reuse, standardization. These are going to be very important things. We're not helping companies build new architectures, right? But we are making sure that once they, the architectures they have today, they can recover investments from, and then whatever they're going to do tomorrow is done in an efficient modular type.
Tomorrow's going to be fascinating because we don't know what Willow's going to unlock. If you read the papers, Willow could potentially unlock encryption. If you look at what can it unlock from autonomy, what can it unlock from large language models, the possibilities are endless. And what it's going to do, now it's going to start an arms race. What Jensen's going to have to say, and then Amazon's probably going to come out with their quantum chip, and then we're going to have this next great race. And when we do have the great race, we'll have you back to discuss what that race looks like. As we look to wrap up for today, Prashant, what would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
I have a lot of, or a sense of optimism, right? The almost gratitude also for what the industry has done so far to unlock and help the economy with the, it's a $6 trillion industry, 40 million jobs, just unprecedented impact on the economy. And I think it's, despite all the chaos and confusion that we hear, I think things will get better. And I believe in the power of technology and software and AI to help unlock some of that. It is going to need innovation, and I think it's not going to need, more importantly, collaboration and capital efficiency. And again, very excited about the role that SDVerse is playing in, especially on the innovation, collaboration, capital efficiency aspect of in helping the industry.
Be optimistic, build the future. Today is tomorrow, tomorrow's today. The future is SDVerse. Prashant, thank you so much for coming on SAE Tomorrow Today.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to SAE Tomorrow Today.
SAE International makes no representations as to the accuracy of the information presented in this podcast. The information and opinions are for general information only. SAE International does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast.